Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It's 2021. We got a new year. We did it. We made it through the year of hell. It was awful. It was bleak. It didn't bring really any good news whatsoever, but I've got good news for you. 2021 is off to a worse start.
Yeah,
So
I'm not enjoying the sequel so
yeah,
far.
yeah, the sequel is really building off of where the last story arc ended. And I think we're gonna have to get to the third sequel before we get the resolution. But regardless, we're here. We're in the thick of it. It's great to be here. It's so great to be here with Doug Sartori. Doug, I think it's a little bit earlier than March.
Close, actually. I
Oh,
know it's a fairly serious subject we're talking about today, but I couldn't help think of the parallels to the Catalanarian conspiracy in the Roman Republic. So that is my background. You are looking at Cicero accusing Catiline of exactly what he was doing, which was trying to overthrow the government because he lost an election.
always appreciate your ability, Doug, to draw a direct parallel to what has already occurred before. I love your appreciation for Greek history. It's really fun. You always share like direct links and references to the situations that you're referring to. I'll never read them because like that takes someone like you to like actually do it and care about it, but it's nice to have it contextualized. So like thank you. It's really appreciated.
You're welcome, and look forward to my next podcast, Rome Talk.
Rome talk and how it translates to Windsor City Council coming to you soon.
Yeah, the niche of the niches.
We also have Don Merrifield Jr. coming to you live from his white void. It has persisted through. How are you, Don?
I'm yeah, very good. Just I guess in the third episode when Fonzie jumps the shark, that's when we know this party's over, right?
Yeah. And it's feeling like it. It feels like we've
Yeah.
jumped the shark. We're in a whole different place right now.
And unlike Doug, I like to read books that just have a lot of pictures in them. So it's almost the same.
Fair
Not
enough.
nothing wrong with that. Of course, I'm John Lidke. I'm so happy to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you for joining us. On a much more somber and serious note, we are sitting on the Canadian side of the border here in Windsor, Ontario, watching, I guess, I don't know, America fall. I don't know a better descriptor to use other than, the hyperbolicness of that. It is very much Olympus has fallen. The Capitol was taken today. The House and the Senate were both taken. A woman was shot by Capitol Police after trying to breach the floor of the House chamber. Politicians have been sheltering in place. Quite frankly, there have been white supremacists who have tried to take the seat of the United States government. We have watched the state houses in Alabama, Kansas, as well as Georgia fall to armed protesters. There is nothing funny to note about what is occurring. It is quite frankly one of the most terrifying episodes to watch of American government since arguably the Civil War to the American Revolution itself. There is a president of the United States who refuses to condemn the actions of what's occurring, and a Republican administration who refuses to take account for what they have not only bred, but also fomented and helped to grow over the past 4 years. It is disparaging to watch. It is horrifying to watch. And it is something that we here in Windsor, Ontario, a border city, obviously pay far more attention to than most others in the country. We are the canary in the coal mine. So before we get to our show tonight, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation because it would be impossible to do this show without discussing what's occurring so very close to us. But before that, I will set up what we're speaking about tonight. We will be bringing on the show Councillor Reno Bordelin, who will be speaking with us about a back and forth dispute that was aired very publicly across not only social media, but media as well, regarding the spending and budgetary expenditures of not only the Windsor Essex Economic Development Corporation's spend on Christmas greeting cards, holiday greeting cards for already identified supporters of the new mega hospital location, but as well a dispute about spending of the Downtown Windsor Business Improvement Association and their spending of money on the appeal to the LPAT that we have discussed prior on the show. There was a bit of a, I don't know, I guess murky situation, we could say, where the mayor of Windsor, Drew Dilkins, tried to suggest that BIA funding was public dollars, which of course it's not. I can tell you as a prior business owner, BIA funding comes from the businesses themselves. But Mayor Dilkins tried to suggest that BIA funding was your money, tried to suggest it was taxpayer dollars, while obfuscating the fact that Windsor Essex Economic Development Corporation money is, in fact, the public dollars that were being expended on a arguably incredibly political decision. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be bringing in Councillor Bortle in to speak about it as well. Though I need to make clear right now, we invited Mayor Dilkins and we invited Weed C CEO Stephen McKenzie to come on the show tonight to speak with us about this. Both of their offices didn't even respond to Rose City politics. Listen, we're not a big city news organization. We get it. We're just a little podcast here in Windsor trying to explain to you listeners what's going on in the city. But it was surprising to not even receive a refusal to appear on the show. We think that your listenership is important to us. We really do think that you're listening to us, you're trying to learn what's going on in this community and you're gaining something from it. So it really is disheartening that both the mayor and, the mayor's the mayor. It's a political office. I get that. He doesn't want to come on the show. He thinks the questions are going to be too hard. Maybe he just doesn't like us. That's fair. It's a new year. If he doesn't want to come on, that's his prerogative. But Stephen McKenzie is the CEO of the Windsor Essex Economic Development Corporation, and he's not willing to come on the show. Didn't even respond to our request. He's taking your money. This organization is taking your money. They're funded by taxpayers. Won't even respond to a request from the media.
Well, in his defense, I've changed my phone number 3 times in the last 10 years, and you guys still find me. So,
well, we're very good at tracking people down and making sure the requests go out. But it is very disheartening. So we'll get to that. We will talk about all of this, and Councillor
We might
Bortle,
get to that.
yeah, we might.
I hope so. I hope so. But let's, Doug, start off with you right now. You've heard enough from me as I've started things off. You've been watching the news today, working, I'm sure. What is your take on what you're seeing happening? Not a kilometer away, but so very close to us.
So I think that what we saw today in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals across the country is the culmination of Trumpism. I really do believe that this violent acts that happened today were instigated and encouraged by the president. I think that the president of the United States refusing to concede an election that he lost is what has brought us to this point. And it really drives home how important it is for the participants in democracy to take democracy seriously. And there's a cliche that you hear often from people who've lost an election, that the people are always right. Well, this is why that ethic has to be the top priority for every elected official and every person who aspires to be an elected official. Legitimacy in a democracy comes from faith in the process and winning at the ballot box. And if you undermine the very system that delivers power, you are undermining the fabric of our society. Uh, I think that the game that Donald Trump has been playing over the past months and years is coming to roost now, and I think that his enablers in the media and his enablers in the Republican Party have a hell of a lot to answer for. Now, having said all of that, and I think all of that is true, I don't think that. I do think this is a dangerous moment. I don't think that we need to be apocalyptic right now today. I think this situation can be handled. It's a very unfortunate situation, and it's going to take some time for it to go away. But I don't think that this is a time for people to be losing heart or losing faith in democracy or in the American system. I think this is a time for people to double down on their faith in democracy and in the American system, and to fight to make the system what it promises to be and what it needs to be. And at the end of the day, I think this is a reminder for everyone, whether you're an American or not, that democracy is fragile. Democracy is not something that is guaranteed. Having a system that allows the people to have a say and allows for all of us to have faith that there will be a peaceful transfer of power when elections happen. That's not something that happens by magic. It's not something that tradition guarantees us. Many democracies in the world have died by suicide, and I would hate to see that happen to the American democracy. It is not inevitable. It is very important that people in positions of authority and responsibility on both sides of the aisle in the United States get a goddamn grip and say the things that they need to say and do the things that they need to do to get things back on track, or America will go to a very dark place.
Well, I would just like to add that that's very upsetting because I've been polishing my Mad Max outfit for the whole day today, and I was really hoping I'd be able to get to wear that next week. So,
What color chaps do you have, Don?
well, obviously, human skin colored because that's how it's going to be.
Okay, all right.
it it is really, I don't know, Doug. I think that you're far more optimistic about things, and that might just be something that comes like with age. That you like, I don't mean to be. I don't mean to use that as an
Wow,
insult by any means.
ageist in the first 10 minutes of the show.
But
That's
no, but
very
rather
upsetting.
like, you've seen more things, and I understand that my input and output on this situation is looking at this, I don't want to say lighting a hair on fire, but to me, like, this is the worst thing that I have seen in my life in terms of governing a constitutional democracy. And so it brings me much pause and much concern. So I do appreciate, though, that you're able to look at this and go like, no, like we can look past this, and there will be, if some would say, the better angels that may come from it.
Don't you think?
This is the analogy that I want to give you. Okay, this is like a grease fire starting in your kitchen. It's a dangerous moment. You have to do the right things.
Yeah.
If you do the wrong things, your whole house is going to catch fire. That's the moment that we're at right now. So let me be clear. I don't think that things are just going to happen magically and be magically good. I think you got to cover that fire. You got to do the right things. You know, very bad things could happen coming out of this moment, but they're not inevitable. Sorry, Don, I stepped on you.
Well, I was just going to say you had mentioned that this is kind of the culmination of years of Trump doing, but don't you think this goes back farther? This starts with the Tea Party movement that probably started, George Bush time. And
I say go back to Newt Gingrich if you really want to like look at it.
Yeah, I mean, he was, and it's all part of the deal, right? But I think it really took shape once the Tea Party got involved with the Republican Party, and you saw that in even during the Obama elections. There was a fight in the Republican. You had to suck up to this portion of the party now because all it takes is 10 or 20% votes to disappear, and you were losing. So they've been playing along with this extremist part of the Republican Party for quite a while, and Trump just became the poster boy, leader of this group and kind of took over thing. And to be honest, we've been starting to see that in Canada too with the Conservative Party. There's some people, and look, I identify as a Conservative Party member. Uh, so you see it in their party too. You're starting to see them, whether they actually believe what these people are saying is irrelevant, because politicians put politics over a lot of things all the time. It's all about winning the election. And if you got to appease somebody who's, a big voting block, and, if you want, we see that in all parties, they appease certain voting blocks because of size. But this extremist kind of anti government, you're all crooks, let's burn the place down. You're seeing that here in Canada. And hopefully we can learn something, or the politicians will learn something, that this is always how it's going to end. It's not going to end any different. And, hopefully, like I say, hopefully there's people in our country who are, in the Conservative Party, are looking at this going, maybe this is the wrong path to go down.
It's interesting you say that. Like, I have never identified as a member of a political party. Now, that's not to say I haven't purchased memberships in parties to attempt to influence the outcome of like leadership votes. I think that's a very important thing that citizens should do. But as a journalist, of course, like when I have been, a traditional journalist, if you will, and not just, I guess, an opinion maker as I am now, um, I have certainly been concerned looking at the Conservative Party here, whether it even be provincial or federal in Canada. And it's this idea of what like a big tent is, right, Don? In terms of like, who are you bringing into it? And what views are these people holding? Like, how do you seek to potentially win the electorate? And I think the United States is like that situation on steroids with the Conservative Party, which is they let too many people into the tent that they knew weren't going to be good for the tent. These weren't going to be people that they would ever have normally sought out to bring into the fold. And quite frankly, it looks like they've outsized not only their influence, but they've become the tent themselves. And how do you tame that back? I'll argue it's very difficult to do so. And like that's, I mean, I don't want to go very inside baseball, but you're all listening to a niche local political podcast, and this is the very reason that the Whig Party in the United States fell out of existence. The Missouri Compromise fell apart. There wasn't the ability to keep a coalition between slave owners and abolitionists in the same party, and a factionalism was created that caused a massive division. And I would argue that that's obviously happening right now in the United States. But I would say that locally, the concern for our conservative parties, whether it be provincial or conservative, would be this same potential issue. I don't think these are bad. I don't think our leaders are bad people. And I don't think our leaders want to see any outcome, the likes of which that we're seeing across the border. But I think that, this playing footsie is it's a cause to be concerned of.
So this is a weird thing for me to say and do, but let me defend the Conservative Party on this a little bit. Um, at the end of the day, in a limited party system, and we have
I
a
would
more
also
fluid
just like
system.
I would like to introduce our new Windsor West conservative candidate, Doug Sartori.
Oh boy, um, you're
Sorry.
killing me, man.
Sorry. I'm
Uh,
sorry.
the Canadian system has multiple parties, and it's certainly a more fluid system than the two-party system in America. But we are effectively a two-party system when it comes down to forming national governments, the same as the Americans. And if you aspire to govern a country, you need to build a broad coalition that includes all kinds of people. Um, right-wing parties throughout the world have to grapple with this. You can't leave people who have an authoritarian bent out completely out of the tent. Number one, because excluding big swaths of people from the political process is a very dangerous thing to do. And I think some of what we're seeing may relate to that. And number two, those views are valid to some extent. I mean, the viewpoint, even though I don't agree with it, it has some contribution to make to the conversation. So for a political party that is on the right, you have to figure out a way to engage honorably with and find the best in the authoritarians, the traditionalists, those folks who are going to potentially be part of your movement. And you have to channel those impulses and find a way to make them constructive. And I think that's true for parties on the left as well, by the way. I think that they have the same challenges. You don't want to exclude too many people from your tent if you can help it. So having said that, what happened in the States and why is it different? Well, I think in the US, we had a Republican Party that really has allowed itself to be hijacked by right-wing authoritarians, and it's a serious problem. And I think that is in part because the institution, the Republican Party institution, was not strong enough to see off Donald Trump as a nomination candidate. Um, it may be a weird thing to compare Donald Trump to George McGovern, but I think that there is a comparison to draw there. McGovern was the wake up call for Democrats that they had to appeal to mainstream America, that they could not let motivated activists on the fringe of their party determine who was going to be the nominee, because that path led to extinction. And I think in a very similar vein, Republicans, at least it seemed to me that many of the traditional elements of the Republican Party saw the danger of Donald Trump and actually warned about that. Some of his strongest supporters in the Senate and in the House of Representatives were some of his strongest critics during that primary process that he ultimately won.
Lindsey Graham comes to mind. If we nominate Donald Trump, he will destroy this party, and we will deserve it.
Right, but ultimately, when you nominate a presidential candidate, you are creating a de facto leader of the party. So,
Absolutely.
So what I hope will happen when the dust settles is that the Republican Party will take a hard look at its institutions and build the kind of structures that it needs to prevent this kind of event from happening again. Without the party apparatus, Donald Trump has no power and no ability to secure the presidency. It's weird to say this again, but I think Ross Perot was a much stronger candidate than Donald Trump. And Ross Perot could not get anywhere near the presidency. All he could do was guarantee that the Republicans wouldn't win. And maybe that's the lesson that Republicans took from, and were more concerned with not making their presidential candidate in 2016 unviable by ending up with an independent Donald Trump run that skewered them, and instead handed the keys to the kingdom to him. But here we are, and I think that today it's quite clear in my mind that every single Republican who loves their country has a responsibility to repudiate Donald Trump and to do it in the strongest possible terms.
Do you think this leads to, has been speculated many times in the last year, the right-wing Trump party who takes all these Tea Party people and creates his own movement, news media, the Newsmax people of the world, and he becomes a permanent, well, that whole sector of the party becomes a permanent thorn in the side of, your standard, who would have thought Mitt Romney seems, very middle of the road now compared to, what he was 10 years ago, what the party was 10 years ago.
This goes into what I just said earlier. Like there is no Republican Party anymore. There hasn't been a Republican Party since he became the nominee. Like Lindsey Graham said it. If we nominate him, we will destroy ourselves. We will deserve it. And that's where we're at. You elect a cult of personality to your leader as your leader. That's what you get. You go and you increase your party membership by 9 million people, as well as indoctrinate, 50 to 70% of your membership. that is who your party becomes. We will just watch a factionalism divide. There won't be a Republican Party left. There will have to be a new party that is born out of it, of constitutional Americans, and let the Trump party, destroy itself and destroy the conservative movement, unfortunately, for probably the next generation to 2 generations. You look at the $2 trillion in tax cuts that they did over the past 4 years, you look towards stacking the courts, as much has been done, and I'm pretty sure that history will look back at that as, just rob the store of everything while you have the opportunity to do so, because I'm pretty sure they knew what the writing on the wall was. The second that Trump became the head of the party was the end of the party. And it'll take a very principled conservative to step forward and say, I'm going to become the leader of a new party that probably won't win for the next 8 to 10 years, to 12 years, 14 years. But I will be the titular head of a party to try to bring about, conservative ideals the way that they used to be, not what makes Ivanka and Don Jr. happy.
Well, American politics runs on money, far more than politics do here, and I think it's really important to remember that because
That's a good point.
the they're the folks, the billionaires, the millionaires, the folks who fund the Republican Party, they don't want this kind of chaos.
No.
This is not good for business. This is not creating an atmosphere of stability. Uh, I think I
No,
think that
companies will put their money in Bitcoin right now before they'll invest in the American stock market.
I think it's a self-limiting factor. In a weird way, the dominance of money in American politics might be a limiting factor on how far this thing can go. But just to go back to party politics a little bit, I think one of the things that is maybe not obvious to people who are outside of partisan politics, but politics runs on enthusiasm. Besides money, you need volunteers. You need people who are going to carry your message. You need people who are going to slug it out in comment sections. You need people who are going to um, spend their Saturday and Sunday afternoons knocking on doors for you, or dropping literature, or pounding signs into lawns, and so forth. Enthusiasm is what gets those volunteers off the couch. And when you have a group of people who are extremely enthusiastic, um, even if they are ideologically in a weird place compared to the party they belong to, they will drive that party. And they will move that party in their direction. And I think we've seen that happen here in Canada, in multiple parties at different times. So the danger is, if you've got this massive group of very motivated and enthusiastic people who are willing to fly your banner, I think that it's very, very tempting and very, very difficult to turn them away and repudiate them and say, we don't like you. And there's a frog boiling aspect to this, because I think that these elements have been in the Republican Party for a long time. There have been elements like this who are in the party. And I think what Trump did is, he activated and energized and knew how to speak the language in a way that would take that small group of people who were inside the party system and activate a whole bunch of people who were turned off of party politics because they didn't see themselves reflected in any party, because their perspectives were frankly kind of nuts. And he tapped into that and created that new well of enthusiasm. And just like you brought up the Tea Party, Don, and similar to that Tea Party stuff, Tea Party activists were not winning elections because millions of Americans bought into their bullshit. They were winning elections because thousands of highly engaged people were buying into their bullshit and doing all the things that it takes to elect a candidate.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. There's a narrative out there. I've even said it a few times over my lifetime that any idiot can run the government better than these idiots can run the government. Uh, I think and we do it here all the time. I think there's a lot of people who take shots at politicians, and I think that benefits some politicians. I think they prefer it that way. If you think all politicians are corrupt, you can easily be manipulated to vote for a corrupt politician. Uh, So I think if anything, if anybody takes anything from this, and we could even expand this out to the situation that's going on with the coronavirus and how some governments and some politicians have handled it. Governments pretty much can almost pseudo run on their own over 4-year periods or 5-year periods on their own. The people who are in government administration, the people behind the scenes, they can make the wheels roll. It's when something bad happens or a traumatic event, war, pandemic, economic collapse, that's when the politicians really start to matter a lot more. And I think this is a perfect example, coronavirus, and especially what's going on in the States, of it really does matter who you vote for. They talk about the great turnout of the electorate in the last U.S. election. There's still tens or maybe even hundreds of millions of people, or 100 million people who didn't vote, who still aren't voting because they don't care. They're all corrupt. They're all idiots. Anybody can do this job. They're all in it for themselves. And then you get someone who really is corrupt, in it for himself, and is a great manipulator, and he gets in power and things like this happen. I don't know if it's going to be the great wake up call, because there seems to be a lot of people who think that this is still fantastic and let's burn it all down. But I think, if anything, hopefully people are taking from this, your vote matters, who you vote for matters. And, you know, any idiot can't run government because it's actually a job and it takes some skill to do this.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just not call him an idiot. I mean, he was the host of the Celebrity Apprentice.
No, and not well, but you know what? There are politicians all around the world right now, especially with the populist movement that's going on, who are just celebrities. I mean, there's a comedian running Ukraine. I mean, he was a
Hey,
comedian and he got elected.
Don, I'm gonna give you this, okay? You get 2 minutes right now. Go on your Trudeau celebrity rant. You get 2 minutes. Just do it.
I would love to, but today's not the day. I'll save that for another day. But it's the same kind of politician. They're
Oh, good.
populists.
I'll have that to look forward to.
Restraint held by Don Merrifield. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you're happy. You have just met a new resolution of 2021.
Well, and again, I'm not going to go right after Trudeau, but when you elect a personality and a person, as opposed, look, I want my politicians to be boring old, no offense, accountants. Sorry to all my accountant friends out there who just work the books, do what's right, and make things good for everybody. I don't want some celebrity out there telling me how to think, what I should be doing, what's right, what's wrong, like a Trump type person who can encourage people who probably don't give things a lot of thought to act on it. So what my rant was, politicians matter and who you vote for matters. And if anything, hopefully people take that from this whole situation.
For sure. Now, Doug, you had something that you wanted to add to that, and I want to shift the tone a little bit and make this more local. But what did you have to say?
Well, I think Don is right on with some of his comments. I think it's really important to have professionals in government, and have respect the professionals in government, and have a respect for expertise. I think all of that is really important. I don't think that the attitude that we should elect a Donald Trump because they could just do the job better, or they could do the job just as well, is a good way to go. The flip side of that is that I think establishment politicians in the United States should look in the mirror as well and ask themselves, what did we do over the past 25, 30, 40 years that that created such an erosion of faith in the traditional elite politics in the United States? Look, ultimately, and I really believe this, all political problems are ultimately solved. And what I mean by that is that you can't have an immense gap between the political challenges that a society faces, and the what the politicians are focused on and what the politicians are doing. That just can't last forever. The problem is that the way that you solve those problems may be more or less unpalatable. And if you don't find a way to solve those problems, the problems of real people, the problems of your society, if you can't solve them through traditional approaches, if you can't solve them with the institutions that govern and run your country, then you create an appetite to tear those institutions down. And I don't really want to subscribe to the narrative that Trumpism is born of legitimate grievances, because I think that's really overplayed. And I think if you look at the data and dig into who voted for Trump, you can see that there are some pretty serious limits to that narrative. At the same time, if Americans had faith in institutions, Donald Trump would never have been elected. So everybody has something that I think they need to look at and think about as they move forward. Okay, that was what I had to say.
That is a really, like, that's a brick to the face. Like, you're absolutely right about all of that. If America wasn't as fundamentally as in the state that it's in right now, I do agree. We probably wouldn't be watching them in the state that they're in right now. Let's try and contextualize, because if there's nothing else to local media, we've got to localize the story. We have seen some small names in this community and some larger names in this community try to tack themselves on to this Trump administration. This program has obviously been speaking out for a number of years about the concerns that the Trump administration has brought forward. I'm not going to say that anyone here has predicted what the outcome would be, especially today, but we have certainly been raising red flags, if you will. And on the top of my mind, the top of mind for our discussion group is a local entity, Barry Zeckelman of Atlas Tube, who lobbied Donald Trump directly, paid a lot of cash, I believe in the six-figure range, to attend a private meeting with a number of other donors, if you will, in the White House, trying to hawk his steel for the border wall. And the biggest issue here, it's not just that a local person was trying to do that, although that would be a story in and of itself. It's the fact that, of course, St. Clair College is trying to bill itself as a hub for international students, while at the same time having one of its largest benefactors, of which multiple schools on its campus, institutions on its campus, have been named after Zeckelman. And it's a situation that, of course, today has borne an outcome that I'm sure St. Clair College did not want to have to answer for, let alone consider, but an assault upon American democracy. And with Barry Zeckelman being a large benefactor and wanting to help create and fulfill one of Donald Trump's largest policy objectives, it's probably worth having a discussion about. I'll let you know how I feel about it. I didn't like it when I first heard about the donation. I thought that the meeting that Barry Zuckelman went to at the White House was disgusting. As a Jew, I find it to be, just a little disgusting, but that's just a personal thing. I find it to be reprehensible, though, that for someone who donates so much to one of our local educational institutions, that it's trying to bill itself as a, bastion of diversity, would attempt to limit the opportunities for diverse cultures to come and join into our communities as well. Doug, I would like to get your opinion about this. Am I completely offhand here with my criticism? Am I just off the deep end here? And that's completely fair. Lord knows I have been many a time. Or am I hammering on something here that actually does have a bit of resonance?
So I think it's an interesting issue, and I don't think you're totally off base here. Mr. Zeckelman is entitled to his political views, just as every citizen of this country and citizen of the United States is entitled to have their political views. Um, I do think that it's when you're talking about someone who is so prominent in the community and who has made made their support for Mr. Trump so apparent, I think that it is more than reasonable to challenge that. I just want to add to your comments about the donation that apparently was connected to the opportunity to dine with President Trump. Also, Wheatland Tube, a company that Zekelman is the CEO for, donated 1.75 million to the Trump reelection campaign. So certainly a significant contribution. I don't think I've ever heard anything out of Barry Zekelman's mouth that makes me think that he is an enthusiastic Trump supporter because of Trump's views on race, because of Trump's views on immigration, because of Trump's views on social issues. I don't think I've ever heard Mr. Zekelman say anything about that, and I have no reason to think that he holds those views. I think Barry Zekelman is a business person who is putting the needs and the what he believes the needs and the opportunities for his business first. Um, and I think my guess is I think that's what this is about. You know, he made the donations, he got the the contracts for the border wall. That may be a coincidence, it may not, but you can understand. And I think that business people at a small and a large scale do this sort of thing all the time, attempt to find a way to gain influence with government to further their interests. Lots of people do this sort of thing. Um, I do think, though, that it's worth pointing out that Mr. Zuckelman also took Trump's side and took America's side on trade issues during very sensitive trade negotiations. In fact, had some really sarcastic and negative things to say about Chrystia Freeland, who was our negotiator of NAFTA at the time. I find that to be an extremely poor taste. I found that to be very distasteful and unfortunate. I don't think that that's an appropriate thing to do. But there are lots of people in this town who hold those type of views, I'm sure. The difference is that they don't all have access to media. And I think it's fair and worth asking the question of local media is what exactly is the reason why Mr. Zekelman deserves a platform anytime he wants to communicate with the media and basically try to influence politics in order to further his business interests. And is that a good thing? I also think that it raises a really good and important point. You raised a really good and important point, and that is the donation to St. Clair College. Philanthropy is a good thing. Donating money to institutions is a good thing. Myself, I've always found it kind of odd when philanthropy is tied to naming. When you are purchasing, you're putting your name on a building. Zekelman's certainly not the only person who has ever done that. There's lots of other examples. I think a few came up in our pre-show chat. But what are you doing when you do that? Yeah, sure, there's an ego aspect to it, but what you're really doing, I think, when you buy naming rights and when you buy your name on a building like the Zekelman School of Business at the college, what you're doing is you are tying your reputation to that institution, and you're trying to improve your reputation. You know, you're trying to polish your reputation in the community a little bit, and I think that that's at least partly, I think it's reasonable to assume that that would be part of the motivation for making the donation to St. Clair College, but it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street because the institution is also being tied to the reputation of the donor. Uh,
Absolutely.
and so, I don't know, I don't know how, I don't know how, what the timing exactly is of the donation, the building naming in relation to some of Mr. Zekelman's interventions in politics and on issues. If I remember correctly, they were sort of happening in parallel. That some of the Freeland stuff was happening before and presumably during negotiations over the naming of the building and all that stuff. So I think if you're an institution, you really have to ask yourself, sure, this money would be great. We're going to take a check. But is it good judgment to take whoever wants to come and put their name on your building? And if there weren't any red flags raised inside the college at the time, well, I think that may be an issue, because certainly Mr. Zuckelman has turned out to be quite controversial. And I think in hindsight, now that hopefully the Trump era is coming to an end in disarray and disgrace, it really puts a different tenor on the comments that he made in the past, and that reflects on everybody who's associated with him, unfortunately.
Well, it's either negligence or it is a willful act of looking the other way. I mean, that's the only way to take it. I'm fairly certain if we were able to sit down with a communications person from St. Clair College, they would of course say, we don't associate ourselves with any of the actions that he was a part of. We don't want to have anything to do with it. And of course, it's the opposite of what our mission is, trying to be a welcoming campus to so many diverse people that we respect and seek to welcome into our community. I'm sure that would be the statement. The issue is, I think, just, the spotlight hasn't been cast far enough on it.
Well, let me just say the Merrifield outhouse in Jackson Park that I donated to is going to stay there, and it's going to be proud for years and years. I take a little bit of a different, and I think this is how a lot of business people, quote unquote, will look at this. Politics is
How dare you? How dare you?
Well, business people look at politicians as it's opportunity. I understand.
Yep.
Look, Zuckelman's not just a Canadian businessman. He's got business interests. He's got steel mills down in the States too. I mean, this isn't just he works in Windsor and happens to be a billionaire. He has interests all over the place. So businesses, all of them, play this game with politicians all the time. And a lot of times you'll see they donate to various parties at the same election just because they don't know who's going to get in. His personal opinions, some of the things he said about politicians in Canada, he's entitled to say whatever he wants. I'm not going to go after him completely because to me, everybody does this. You're donating to politicians in hopes of getting influence. Millions of companies around the world hire lobbyists to go down and lobby politicians all the time. And a lot of these lobbyists are ex-politicians. So now the thing with St. Clair College, that's a different discussion in my opinion. If you're a billionaire, you can donate, do whatever you want with your money as long as it's not illegal. And to me, he was just doing what every other businessman in the world does. They try to donate, especially in the United States, because as Doug brought up earlier, the United States political system is based off of money, and that's it.
Listen, if he wants to donate to the show, we will drop this conversation immediately.
I'm pretty sure he's never going to donate to the show now. And none of us are getting invited.
Not at this point.
No. But if he wants to donate, and again, this is American politics. I mean, it's a little different in Canada, like Doug kind of brought up to be in the show, because look, American politics, you have to have billions of dollars to run a presidential campaign down there. So it's just ripe for manipulation and influence peddling by donating large sums of money. So I don't see what Barry Zuckelman did any different than what any other international business person who has a business interest in the United States would have done.
Okay, but let me ask you this, Don. Do you think that Donald Trump is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think that he is a disgrace, or do you think that he is a reasonable American politician?
I think Donald Trump is the result of American culture. I think America has a portion of their country that is a disgrace and thinks like this. I've said this numerous times online. No matter what you think about Donald Trump got 80 million votes. Donald Trump is America. He represents a large portion of the American population.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And I think personally, and this is, I have a lot of American friends who probably aren't going to talk to me anymore, but this is on top of everything that's happened. What this has shown, hopefully them and the world, is the complete fraud of American superiority and greatness that is constantly propagandized into people's heads. I was even watching the news today, and they're having politicians and some news reporters going, this is a terrible scene. The world looks at, American democracy greatness around. No, we don't. No one gives a shit about. There's democracies everywhere. Our democracy in Canada is 10 times better than what's going on in the States. Our country is 10 times better than what goes on in the States. This has just been the fulfillment of years and decades of self-propaganda telling themselves that they're so great and everybody wants to be them. And Donald Trump represents that. He represents that portion of the United States that believe that without looking at it from an intellectual standpoint. There's democracies all over the world.
Okay. I just want to get back to the Zuckelman thing.
Yeah.
And I was leading with the question because I think that you do think that Donald Trump is a disgrace. And
100%.
And I think Donald Trump is disgraceful, and his conduct has been disgraceful. And that is not the right wing does not have a monopoly on disgraceful politicians. There are people who are willing to conduct themselves in that type of manner. That the progressive or left-wing politics are not immune to any of that. The point I'm getting at here is it's judgment. It's one thing to make a donation because to the party that you think will give you some benefit, or to make your support for a political party visible. I think that if you vocally supported Donald Trump at any point after 2016, your judgment comes into question. Everything that has happened since he was elected has happened on a continuum. There's no break in it. He didn't wake up one day because he was struck by lightning or whatever, and suddenly became the disgraceful politician that he is today, undermining democracy and his own self-interest. Everything that has happened in the last 4 years was obvious that this is the road. This was a possible outcome going all the way back to 2016. So Barry Zuckelman is not a Republican. He's not an American politician. There was no requirement for him to support or tacitly support or be quiet about criticism of Donald Trump. None of that happened. So it's one of two things. Either he has catastrophic judgment about political matters, or he doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
Those
care.
are the two options.
Well, and I would agree with that, because I think he looked at this from a business aspect. Businesses don't care about politics unless it can get them something. He looked at this as a business decision. Donald Trump got elected. There was a multi-billion-dollar contract out there, required a lot of steel. Go after it. I mean, in this country, we've heard discussions about why are we selling armored personnel carriers to Saudi Arabia? And the justification usually is, well, if we don't, someone else is going to do it. So I would be more upset with a government taking that stand than a private citizen or private business owner just saying, look, I'm going to do what I got to do for business purposes.
Yeah, sure. And again, I don't want to hammer too much on this, but like I'll be the guy on the panel that's the Jew. And I find it really, really reprehensible. I find, just personally myself, I'll take it all on me. I find it to be reprehensible that a Jew was able to look at this and say, that's what I want to hitch my wagon to. The things that we were raised to say was never again. We will never tolerate for anybody whatsoever. And he looked at it and he made his decision and said, I can make a buck off of that. So I agree with the sentiment that he made his decision. I just don't care. Can make I can make some money off it, and that's what it is. And it hits me personally.
And and obviously you have a completely different perspective on this than we do. But I agree with you. I don't think him or a lot of business people do care.
Well, we need to see more people care.
But I think a lot of people compartmentalize things, and a lot of people do it on all sides, and not only talking about this situation.
Well, that's what's so dangerous about political compromise, right, Don? Because there comes a point where you shouldn't be compromising. You can't get anywhere in politics if you're never going to compromise in any way, or you're never going to give on an issue that you care about in order to get something on an issue that's more important. You're not going to get very far, but you can compromise yourself into some pretty terrible positions, which is unfortunate. So I think we actually kind of have talked this out a little
I
bit.
think so as well. Yeah.
There's only the only other thing I wanted to bring up tonight, and I don't think we're going to have time to get to those other topics that we
No, I don't
previewed.
think so.
We'll talk about that next week, most likely, folks. But one thing I did want to talk about is and really to kind of go back to Rose City politics and the reason that this show exists. We had allegations of election fraud after 2014. There were some very irresponsible and apparently completely ill or unfounded allegations made by participants in the electoral process, that the election was rigged, that there was chicanery happening with the vote. Those claims were investigated. Those claims were laughed out of court. They were laughed out of every venue that heard them. They were thoroughly investigated by the police. But the point that I want to make is there is no difference between the actions of those municipal politicians who rejected the process that because they lost, and Donald Trump today. The only difference is the scale and importance of it. And I just want to say this: if you can't respect the process, if you can't respect the process when you lose, you have no business being part of the political process in a democracy, period. And I don't know if any of those folks will ever put their name on a ballot again. But in my personal opinion, it is 100% disqualifying when you start to make allegations that undermine people's confidence in the integrity of the electoral system in order to pursue your own personal agenda. That's garbage, and it's totally disqualifying, whether you're the president of the United States or a ward candidate in Windsor.
I don't care what you say. I'm running again.
Don.
You know, it's interesting you say that. We had a glimpse of it here, obviously, locally in Windsor with I'm not going to name them because, quite frankly, they don't need to be named.
Well, there was a
City,
bunch of them. I mean,
there was a bit of a slate of city council candidates and their agents that really tried to whip up exactly the shit that we're seeing right now across the border play out. And you know, quite frankly, I'll say this right now. With the Rob Ford administration in Toronto, we saw very much the same thing as the Trump administration play out, just playing fast and loose with the facts and being willing to just blunder and push your way forward with what your version of truth was. And it's not
all right, settle down there, communist. You don't want
no, actually, it's funny you say that. It's funny you bring up Rob Ford, because
I think we had a bit of a little bit of a snapshot as to what was going to be coming on a larger political scale.
It's funny. I see it differently.
Oh, well, fuck me.
My view is that in hindsight, Rob Ford was so much less heinous and so much less dangerous than Donald Trump. And
I don't mean to compare the two in terms of maliciousness.
But listen, because I think this is an important point that you've kind of surfaced here. The rhetoric around Rob Ford was not very different than the rhetoric around Donald Trump, especially in the early days. The rhetoric of his opponents. Look, I think Rob Ford was not a competent mayor of Toronto. I don't think Rob Ford was. I don't think that he was a suitable mayor. But there is a major difference. I don't think that Rob Ford was a criminal. I don't think that Rob Ford was an agent of chaos. He was just a person an
incompetent person,
a person who had a lot of demons to battle and was not in a position to be an effective mayor. And I think that people on all sides of the political spectrum, but I do think that people on the progressive side need to be careful about this, because there is a tendency to paint every opponent the same way. I'm not too impressed with Aaron O'Toole so far. He's not Donald Trump. I didn't agree with a lot of what Stephen Harper did, but he wasn't Donald Trump. Rob Ford and Doug Ford aren't Donald Trump. And
it's lazy rhetoric to use stuff like that now. And it seems to be acceptable, which is unfortunate.
Rhetoric gets overheated. Well, for sure, rhetoric gets overheated. But I think that there are a few things that we should really try to do, and that is, we should try to keep our rhetoric inside the bounds of reality. And I think there is a reality check here, because I think part of what happened with Donald Trump is that so many of the things people were saying were just like 1 degree more extreme than what they were saying about the last guy and the guy before him and the guy before him and the guy before him. And there's an element of the boy who cried wolf here, because if every politician who is right of center is a fascist, then when
one's a fascist.
Well, right. When a real fascist comes along, what do? Do you call him a super fascist? Like there's
king of the fascists.
You got nowhere to go.
Yeah, you're right. That's a
very good point. Absolutely. I think that's a really good point that you bring up, Doug, there. We need to be careful with our rhetoric and ensure that we are measured in terms of what we have to say versus what the actuality is at hand. And speaking of that, we didn't have time to get to our conversation with Councillor Bordelin tonight. We had crazy antics across the border, but we're going to get to that next week, and we will talk about that budding issue that exists between Weedsea, the DWBIA, and Mayor Dilkins. But we really hope that you guys enjoyed our first episode here of 2021 Rose City Politics. Thanks for tuning in.
Armageddon edition.
Armageddon edition.
I promise we'll be talking about parking, snow removal.
That's right.
And all Christmas the important stuff next week.
Yeah. We will get back to the listener favorites. That is a guarantee.
Yeah.
Although my comments over the years of build a wall between Detroit and Windsor now seem like a pretty good idea.
It is true. We'll still have to figure out the funding sources, but it really
America's going to pay for it. We know how this works, John.
It really pains me to say I agree with Don on that one. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Rose City Politics back at you 2021.